Hello, I'm David Hughes. Welcome to Your Perfect Body, the podcast of the Esoteric Teaching community. Today's selection is an essay entitled Vedic Error Correction Protocols. Spiritual teaching involves passing a communication or message from a higher source to a lower recipient. By definition, the spiritual master teacher is more highly developed, and the student is less developed in consciousness. To help the student progress, the teacher must communicate the message of the esoteric teaching to the student intact. Let's examine this process of communication. Communication involves taking an idea or concept in one person's mind, encoding it into some language or other system of representation, and writing it down or speaking it to another person. The recipient hears or reads the message, decodes the language, and, ideally, is left with an idea or concept identical to the intent of the speaker or originator of the message. Of course, we have all experienced that the process of communication rarely goes so smoothly. But any error in a message can render it useless or even dangerous. If a long mathematical formula or calculation has even one small error in the beginning, the result will be completely erroneous. Similarly, the Vedic spiritual process is precise and scientific. Any error in understanding the process or its application will deviate the result from the original intention. To attain the proper result, the teacher's communication of the message of the teaching must result in an exact duplicate in the student's mind. If the student begins working with a corrupted copy of the teaching, the result will be useless. This is how the process of realizing the esoteric teaching is supposed to work. The process of spiritual realization has 4 stages: duplication, understanding, contemplation, and realization. First, let's look at the process of duplication. After accepting the fact that the pursuit of the absolute truth is the purpose of human life, a sincere candidate approaches a master teacher, an authorized source of this teaching, and receives precise knowledge of the absolute truth. The student can also refer to the literature of the esoteric teaching to verify that the teacher is presenting it accurately, and to reinforce the information in his own mind. This is called duplication. Then, by a long process of practice, experimentation, observation, and inner debate, a student can verify and unify the dynamic elements of this transcendental knowledge, and figure out for himself why it is the way it is. The student must ask himself over and over again, how can it be that this teaching is correct? And work out the inner logic of the teaching for himself. This is called understanding. Next, the student admires the beauty of his personal copy of the absolute truth. When the disciple meditates on the essence of his perfected understanding, this is called contemplation. Prolonged contemplation of the absolute truth leads automatically to the 4th stage of actual enlightenment, or self-realization. Realization of the absolute truth is of 3 types, or in 3 distinct stages: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Each stage has its own well-defined array of yogic techniques performed in the context of the standard Vedic transcendental ontology of the esoteric teaching. These techniques gradually develop into the various spiritual perfections by applying the four basic functions of the intelligence: duplication, understanding, contemplation, and realization, to the transcendental subject matter. The proper use of intelligence is thus the first and the last word in the process of searching for the absolute truth. To use these methods of approaching the absolute truth effectively, one must first mentally record or duplicate the background philosophy of the teaching. That is, one must read or hear about this philosophy from one who understands it properly, both in theory and in practice. One should hear so nicely that one can repeat and explain the philosophy perfectly, almost like a tape recorder. As far as possible, one must make an exact mental copy of the philosophy of the teaching. This is the standard of duplication. Unless we duplicate the information about the Supreme Absolute Truth, how can we think about it properly? If we start thinking with an imperfect copy of the information, even if we reason perfectly, we may reach spurious, deviant conclusions. If one performs 10 pages of mathematical calculations perfectly, but makes a mistake on the first page, the result will be incorrect. So to be successful in our reasoning about the esoteric teaching, we must start with a perfect duplicate of the teaching, then mature our understanding through a process of inner debate, contemplation, and realization. The school of the esoteric teaching maintains accurate duplication in the transmission from teacher to student by using error correction protocols. We have experience with error correction protocols. Anyone who has connected to the internet with a modem has used error correction communications protocols without even knowing it. Also, in ordinary Western materialistic education, a great deal of information is transmitted from the teacher to the student. How can the teacher be sure that the student has received an accurate copy of the information? By questions, quizzes, tests, and reports. If the student gets a high grade on the test, it indicates that the information has been transmitted accurately. If the student fails the test or has trouble answering the teacher's questions in class, this indicates that a problem with duplication of the information needs to be resolved. Thus, the real purpose behind tests and quizzes in Western academics is error correction of duplication. Reports serve a similar purpose, but indicate that the student has understood the subject well enough to think independently. This level of understanding is a more advanced stage than simple duplication of the subject material. Especially at the university level, education is designed to produce an understanding of the subject, enabling the student not only to think independently without distortion of the conclusions, but also to perform research and make a unique individual contribution to the field. If this is true in mundane education, how much more so in spiritual life? What is at stake is not merely one's material career, but one's eternal spiritual destiny. Therefore, the Vedic lineages of the esoteric teaching use a sophisticated error correction protocol to ensure that the teaching is passed down accurately from teacher to student. This system has proved accurate over many thousands of years. Let's see how this works by comparing the accuracy of message transmission with and without using error correction protocol. The game of telephone is a well-known party pastime wherein a short message is whispered around a circle. The joke of the game is that the final version of the message is nothing like the original. This is because no error correction protocol is used to certify each copy of the message as it is passed around the circle. Now imagine the same game, but each time the message is whispered to the next person in the circle, they must whisper it back until it is certain that their copy is correct. While this might make the game a lot less fun, it would certainly result in improved fidelity in the transmission of the message around the circle. This exercise demonstrates that an error correction protocol is required for accurate transmission and duplication, even of a short message. The esoteric teaching